Hey everybody, welcome to lesson number 2 and number 3 of our first week of quarter 4. Yes, this is a combined lesson. It combines lesson number 2 and number 3. And the reason I did that is because there's been a little bit of a change in the schedule, and I'll explain that in just a few seconds. But lesson number 2, or the first part of this video, is just a very, very brief introduction to Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, and Hamlet, the main text of the quarter, and lesson number 3, or the second part of this video, which is about the use of language in Shakespeare's writing. Since the first part is very brief, it shouldn't be much longer than lesson number 1 as a whole. So, yes, it's not like a mega, huge lesson today. It should be just about the same amount of time as the previous lesson. Okay, but before we get into the schedule, just another reminder for the Ramadan projects, which are due on Saturday once you return to campus. It will be due at the beginning of class on Saturday. For those of you who are submitting electronically, I have now posted the assignment on Google Classroom, so you should be able to submit there. For those of you who did it physically in a journal or a notebook, you will be able to turn that in at the beginning of class. Okay, so the change in the schedule for the rest of the week. Today, Wednesday, May 10th, you are now currently watching video lesson number 2 and number 3, an introduction to Hamlet. The homework assignment, there will be two, number 2 and number 3, but again, here I emphasize, although it's two different assignments, I really only split them up because it's two different sort of subjects, but homework assignment number 2 is just one question, so it shouldn't take much time. And then number 3 is just as short. You'll just be defining some vocabulary as well as covering some questions that you will be introduced to in the second part of this video. Those will be due tomorrow Thursday at 4 p.m. So you'll have well over 24 hours to submit this, which should be more than enough time. And then we have office hours today from 4 to 5 p.m. I've sent an email out with sort of the layout of the schedule for the rest of the week, as well as the link to office hours in Google Meets. And then tomorrow, Thursday, again, you'll be submitting homework assignment number 2 and number 3 by 4 p.m., but there'll be no lesson. And then the next time I'll see you, or the next time you'll have work from me again, is on Saturday once you return to campus. So, an introduction to Hamlet. Again, this will be quite brief, and hopefully we'll have time to cover this perhaps more in depth once you return to campus. But let's get started. William Shakespeare, I think you all know him, who he is, perhaps one of the most important writers in English in history. I know that last quarter, I think, or maybe a previous quarter, for the juniors, they did Romeo and Juliet. I'm not sure if your class did that when you were juniors, but William Shakespeare, it's hard to get enough of him because he was such an influential writer, shaped a lot of the English language, and if you have read Romeo and Juliet and you think you're going to see the same sort of thing, you'll be surprised that Hamlet, the play that we'll be covering, is very, very distinct. It's much more dark, deals with sort of vengeance and sort of more darker themes. Of course, there's similarities because it's the same person writing it, but I don't think you'll find it to be the same experience, or for it to be too similar of an experience as reading Romeo and Juliet. So, he was an English playwright, poet, and actor, and he was born in 1564 and died in 1616, He was the writer of Romeo and Juliet, Othello, Julius Caesar, Macbeth, and many more, of course, Hamlet being one of them. And Shakespeare has created thousands of words in the English language, including bloodstained, frugal, eyeball, and hint, So many words in our English lexicon, was invented by this man right here, which is, quite an incredible accomplishment. But a fun fact I'll add here is that it's actually debated whether or not these plays here, Romeo and Juliet, Othello, right, Julius Caesar, were actually written by William Shakespeare. This is not fully confirmed, although most scholars do think that he wrote these plays. There's actually no conclusive evidence for this. So that is an interesting thing to think about as we're going through Hamlet. Okay, Hamlet by William Shakespeare, of course. It was written sometime between 1599 and 1601. That is an estimate. There's no exact date. So yeah, thought it would be good just to see a cover and start thinking about the themes that may be conveyed through this cover, right? Often when you think of Hamlet, one of the first things you might imagine is someone holding a skull, right? So there's already themes of death, dark themes, maybe some sort of, tension, conflict, right? It doesn't seem to be a very sort of happy story, or maybe as lovey-dovey as Romeo and Juliet, right? So the main theme of Hamlet is really can be summed up pretty accurately with these two ideas, revenge and madness, right? And the relationship between these two ideas. So I thought it would be good to cover the goals of this unit or this quarter, the rest of the quarter, and what our goals are by reading Hamlet, as well as other supplementary readings that will support our understanding of Hamlet, right? So over the course of the unit, we will build our understanding about language and character development, and examine how literary critics have analyzed the character of Hamlet. We will also look at how texts connected to each other to help us better understand a theme or message of Hamlet, right? So some of the things we'll focus on is character development, also how character development and language, or the use of language, is used, right? Again, this is an English class, so the literary element is quite important, but we'll also be reading some texts, some supplementary readings by literary critics, right? Critics who sort of critique literature, right? And how they've analyzed the character of Hamlet. Hamlet is the central figure, the central character of the play Hamlet. Another thing important to keep in mind, like you did with Romeo and Juliet, if you've read that, is that it is a play. So it won't read like the things we read last quarter with, our topics that our fictional novel of Kindred, or earlier in quarter 3, the more non-fictional writings of James Baldwin or Ta-Nehisi Coates, right? It's going to be a very, very different style. And of course, many centuries before those contemporary or more modern writings, right? Another goal is that by the end of this unit, we will read literary and informational texts to understand the concept of revenge, its relationship to madness, and its consequence in Hamlet, right? Again, the central ideas we're going to focus on is revenge and madness, right? Okay, let's move on. The end of quarter major, one of the majors, and perhaps sort of the final project in English before you graduate, is writing a literary analysis determining how Hamlet's apparent madness impacts the central ideas of the play. I'll go over more in depth exactly what a literary analysis is, but it's sort of, self-explanatory. It's analyzing literature through different techniques that we'll cover. But you should be confident that this is something that is in your toolkit, because we've done so much analysis of literature in our class, whether it was non-fictional writings, analyzing sort of more historical and sort of ideas related to social justice, but as well as sort of the narrative devices, right? Remember the narrative device of time travel as a way in which Butler sort of depicts an enduring social injustice, right, in Kindred, right? So that's also a type of literary analysis, kind of figuring out what the different elements of literature does to the storytelling in a particular piece of writing, right? But again here, the core end of Quarter Major is a literary analysis determining how Hamlet's apparent madness impacts the central ideas of the play. So again, madness being one of the central notions in relation to revenge, right? Sometimes, Shakespeare's works can get quite gritty, quite dark, and kind of bloody. And I think in some ways that can be a very intense and interesting and thought-provoking read, right? So I'm excited to go through this play with you guys. What I want you to do now is to, if you don't have a notebook or piece of paper and a pen or pencil, just pause the video right now, go grab that real quick so that you can, jot your thoughts down in response to this question. Just pause it, go grab something to write on and write with, and you can return to this. So, why do I call it a pre-reading exercise? Well, it's, before we really engage deeply with the text of Hamlet, right? It's before we dive into it. In this first part of the video, or lesson number 2, we won't be reading any Hamlet, and in the second part of this video, or lesson number 3, we'll only be reading very short excerpts as examples of the use of language in Shakespeare's writing. But we won't be getting into the first act of the play. I thought it would be best for us to come back together as a class and dive into that when we're in the same space and sort of, collectively together as a class. So, pre-reading exercise. I want you to consider the relationship between revenge and madness, right? Again, the two central ideas of Hamlet, right? And the question I want you to be considering, or rather the two questions I want you to be considering, is how might revenge be related to madness, and how might seeking revenge lead to one's madness, right? There's a distinction in these two questions, right? In general, how might these two ideas be related? But, how specifically might seeking revenge, or wanting to seek revenge, obsessing over revenge, lead to one's madness? Think about this for a couple of minutes, and then jot some of your thoughts down. So now would be a good time to pause this video and take as long as you like to just think, ponder, and then write some of your thoughts down. Before you pause, I will briefly mention to go back to the end of Quarter Major, and since we're writing a literary analysis about Hamlet's apparent madness, this pre-reading exercise is really sort of an attempt to get a head start on the end of Quarter Major, right? We'll be discussing these themes throughout, but it's good, I think, to start thinking about these already. So now you can pause and take some time to think about these questions, and then write your thoughts down. All right, good. I hope you've written something down. Your homework assignment will be in response to this question. So if you wrote something down, it will only be, the more help for you doing the homework assignment, which is homework assignment number 2, which is just directly this question. So for homework assignment number 2, you will just be responding to this question. Okay, so to recap what we've covered in video lesson number 2, we've been introduced to Shakespeare and Hamlet. We've discussed the main theme of Hamlet, right, which is revenge and madness. We've also discussed the goals of this unit and the end of quarter major. And we've also thought a little bit about the relationship between revenge and madness. Also, just to quickly return to this, you might have wanted some sort of answer to this question, but I don't want to give sort of a concrete answer because, first of all, I don't think there's like a right answer necessarily to this question. But I also think the answers to these questions will reveal itself as we go through the play. And it's also one of your main tasks in your end of quarter major. So it's something that you'll be needing to sort of pay attention to, right, as we start to get into Hamlet in the next few days. So yeah, this is what we've done. And then now let's just get into the homework assignment number 2. You can go ahead and do this now if you want. It's already on Google Classroom. Or what you could do is just continue watching this video, lesson number 3, and then do both homework assignments after that. Well, that's up to you. So homework assignment number 2 is already posted on Google Classroom. And for this assignment, you will be answering just one question, and it is one you have already thought about, right? So these two exact questions that you just thought about. But, okay, so go ahead and do homework assignment number 2 if you wish, but I'll go ahead and continue to lesson number 3, and this will be your final lesson of the week online until you come back. So yeah, this is the final stretch. So the language of Shakespeare. I thought I'd not only introduce sort of the basic background of Shakespeare and Hamlet and the themes, but also the language of Shakespeare. Again, if you've read Romeo and Juliet, you probably have noticed that his language or his writing isn't the easiest to understand. So it's really good, I think, in the beginning to get a bit of a primer to get you in the right mindset of how to interpret his writing. Okay, so the language of Shakespeare. The language in the works of Shakespeare can be very difficult to understand. Take, for example, the following passage from Hamlet. So consider this passage here, right? Let me read it out loud and follow along as you're watching this. Therefore, our sometime sister, now our queen, the imperial jointress to this warlike state, have we, as 'twere with a defeated joy, with an auspicious and dropping eye, with mirth in funeral, and with dirge in marriage, in equal scale, weighing delight and dole, taken to wife. One thing I want you to quickly notice is sort of the rhythm in his writing, right? There's always some sort of kind of rhythm in Shakespeare's writing that I find very pleasing when you read it out loud. And you'll see when actors play this play on sort of the stage, they'll sort of lean into this rhythm of Shakespeare's writing, right? If you ever have the time, and we might even watch a scene or so in class, I think you'll definitely notice that. But here I highlight some difficult words, right? Jointress, auspicious, mirth, dirge, and dole. These 5 words here will be added to your vocabulary list. I believe there's 3 in video lesson number 1, but these will just be added. I won't be providing the definitions now, but rather it will be part of your homework number 3. So homework assignment number 3, the first part, you'll be defining these words. And again, just as a reminder, there will be a vocab quiz in week 2 or the first week of returning to campus, right? So I'll probably give you a couple more words on Saturday or Sunday, and then at the end of the week, we'll have a vocab quiz. And then the real thing I want to focus on here is some uncommon contractions. So I've bolded 2, right? The imperial and 'twere, right? If you just look at this, you might be confused as to what these apostrophes are, but they are a sort of contraction, right? So that's one of our main focuses of sort of the unique writing or unique language in Shakespeare, right? So uncommon contractions in Shakespeare's writing. In Shakespeare's writing, you will often find words that are combined by uncommon contractions, right? You never see the imperial or twir, right? And what do they even mean? So let's get into that. So let's review contractions. If you haven't, thought about grammar in a while, especially after this long Ramadan break, just to break this down, can't, right, is can plus not, meaning cannot, right? And don't equals do plus not or do not. And the apostrophes here sort of just shorten these two words so that they're combined, right? The O is knocked out in this, and in can't, the N and the O is knocked out. So again, let's look at this, right? Look at this and read this again. Therefore, our sometime sister, now our queen, the imperial jointress to this warlike state, have we as twere with a defeated joy, right? So just pause and think for a minute what you think are the two words that are being combined by contraction, right? In can't, we have can and not. In don't, we have do and not. What might be the two words in this contraction? And then for twere, what are the two words that might be combined for this contraction, right? So these are the two things I want you to think about, and again, jot down on a piece of paper or in your notebook what two words might the imperial be a contraction of, and what two words might twere be a contraction of. Okay, so again here you can pause this and then write this down. Any guess works. I think it may be obvious, it may be not, but just try your best. Okay, so let's move on. I don't want to answer these questions since it will be a part of your homework assignment, but we will be reviewing it in class once you return. So you can wait for sort of confirmation on whether your answer was correct once we're back together as a class. And then the second part I want to cover in the language of Shakespeare, right, is irregular meanings in Shakespeare's writing. So you will also find words in Shakespeare's writing that do not mean the same thing in modern English, right? And the case of that in the previous passage is the word sometime, right? If we go back to this, it says, therefore, our sometime sister, now our queen. What does sometime really mean, right? So in some instances, certain words in Shakespeare's writing do not mean what they mean in modern English. Take the following line from the previous passage. Therefore, our sometime sister, now our queen, right? So in modern English, sometime means at some unspecified or unknown time, right? So for example, the sentence like, I will finish my homework sometime in the future, meaning at a certain unspecified or unknown time in the future, right? It's sort of denoting a non-specific time, right? Unknown time. So sometime in this case does not mean at some unspecified or unknown time like it does in this sentence, right? So instead, what might it mean? Use context to help you. If it doesn't mean this, right, what would it mean in this line here? Therefore, our sometime sister, right? It wouldn't make sense for it to say some unspecified or unknown time sister. Like that doesn't make sense. So what instead could sometime mean? So again here, you can think about this and then write your response down. And again, use context to help you, right? Therefore, our sometime sister here, now our queen, right? That I think may be a little bit of a hint, right? Okay, so this was very, very quick, right? But these are two things that I think are particular to Shakespeare's writing. sort of uncommon contractions like twere and the imperial, and irregular meanings in Shakespeare's writing, right? So it's old. So not everything is going to mean the same thing. And you really have to sort of read carefully and perhaps read things multiple times to really get what Shakespeare is trying to say. I will say that I think at the beginning it's going to be really challenging for all of us to understand exactly what Shakespeare is trying to convey. But I think we'll get it over time. There's sort of a pattern in his writing, and there's also words that we'll just get used to, right? Sometime once we see it later, we'll understand what it means after we figure out its meaning the first time, right? So these are just two aspects of Shakespeare's unique use of language, and of course there's much more, and we'll dive into this much more deeply once you return. But I just wanted to give you sort of an introduction to how different or unique Shakespeare's writing can be. So vocab, it shouldn't say this following word, it should say the following words will be this lesson's vocab list. You will have the opportunity to practice these words in homework assignment number 3. So again, the 5 words: jointrous, auspicious, mirth, dirge, and dole. And the reason I want you to define it yourself, especially for Shakespeare, is because you're going to need to get into the habit of circling words, highlighting words, because there's going to be a lot of unfamiliar words, or even words that just aren't really commonly used anymore in modern English. So again, to recap lesson number 3, we've discussed the unique use of language in Shakespeare's writing. We've been introduced to uncommon contractions and irregular meanings of words in Shakespeare's writing, and we've identified some challenging vocab words in his writing. So with these 2 lessons, I hope you have some good introduction to Shakespeare and Hamlet. But again, get ready to dive into sort of the unique and wacky world of Shakespeare. And then homework assignment number 3, your second assignment of today's lesson is posted on Google Classroom and will be a mix of some vocab practice and a review of the questions that were presented in this writing. So like the previous homework assignment, you'll just be defining these vocab words and responding to these questions that I've already presented to you in this video lesson, right? These questions. Okay, so that is everything, and I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful rest of your online week. I'm really looking forward to seeing you all on campus and being together as a class again. See you all later. Also, before I forget, there's office hours today from, I believe, 4 to 5. I have sent out an email with the link as well as the change in the schedule. So please remember to come to office hours if you have any questions or if you want to discuss. 4 to 5 today, and the Google Meets link, it was sent to you by email earlier today. So see you later, and see you soon.